They do not tell you this. They sell you a picture of healing as a sunrise, a soft glow, a calm ocean where everything finally feels at peace. They make you believe that once you heal, life will fall into place, people will love you differently, the world will open its arms. But that is not the truth. The truth is harsher, colder, lonelier. Healing does not give you peace first. Healing gives you loneliness, because healing is separation. Healing is rupture. Healing is death before it is rebirth. Healing tears you away from everything and everyone who was bound to the old version of you, the version who tolerated disrespect, who lived in denial, who accepted less than they deserved. And when you let that version die, you do not ascend into immediate bliss. You descend into silence. Carl Jung said, the individuation process means becoming an individual, and insofar as individuality embraces our innermost, last, and incomparable uniqueness, it also implies becoming one's own self. We could therefore translate individuation as coming to selfhood or self-realization. But individuation begins with separation. To find your soul, you must lose the crowd. That is why healing is lonely. Because the moment you stop betraying yourself, you realize how many relationships were built on your betrayal. You realize how many people only loved you because you abandoned yourself for them. You realize how many circles only accepted you because you played small. And when you stop doing that, the circle cracks. People fall away. Entire worlds collapse. This is the loneliness of truth. You no longer fit into the spaces where lies once held you. And yet, the new spaces have not yet opened. You are suspended between the old and the not yet. And in that suspension, you walk alone. Nietzsche knew this path. He called it the path of the Übermensch, the one who rises beyond herd morality, beyond conformity, beyond the comfort of the crowd. He said, the individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. If you try it, you will often be lonely and sometimes frightened. But no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself. When that is what healing costs the tribe. The belonging you thought was love. The comfort of being needed, even if being needed meant being broken. Healing cuts those cords, and you are left standing in the silence of your own selfhood. And silence is terrifying, because in silence there is no distraction. There is no noise to drown out your own voice. In silence you hear everything you ignored for years, the grief, the rage, the shame, the truth. At first it feels unbearable. At first you think healing has made you lonelier than ever. But in reality, healing is showing you the loneliness you always carried but hid with company. This is why so many people abandon the path. They begin healing. They lose the people who fed on their wounds. They feel the cold emptiness of separation and they run back. They call the loneliness a sign they were wrong. They call the silence a punishment. They call the solitude depression. And so they return to the noise, to the betrayal, to the crowd. Better to feel fake connection than real emptiness. But you, if you are brave, you will stay. You will sit in the loneliness until it burns and then until it purifies. You will let the silence strip you down until you meet yourself fully for the first time. You will realize that loneliness is not the absence of others, it is the absence of self. And healing restores that self. It is a brutal paradox. Only when you lose everyone do you finally meet yourself. Only when the noise dies do you hear the soul. Only when you walk alone do you discover that you were never meant to belong to the crowd, you were meant to belong to yourself. This is why healing feels like exile. You become the outcast in your own story. You withdraw from toxic families, manipulative lovers, shallow friendships, empty rituals. You burn the bridges that led only to your own destruction. And when you look back, there is no one behind you. The road is empty. The silence is heavy. And yet, that emptiness is sacred, because it is the soil where your true life will grow. Machiavelli wrote that a prince must be both lion and fox, fierce enough to scare wolves, cunning enough to escape traps. Healing demands the same. You must be lion enough to endure the loneliness, fox enough to see the traps that try to lure you back into your old wounds. The loneliness of healing is a test. Will you go back to the comfort of chains or forward into the freedom of solitude? Will you trade truth for belonging, or will you walk alone until you become whole enough to create new belonging on your own terms? Belief is the first step. Belief that the loneliness is not a sign of failure, but of progress. Belief that losing people is not the end, but the clearing of space for those who truly align. Belief that solitude is not emptiness, but preparation. Clarity follows. Clarity to see who was truly with you and who was only with the broken version of you. Clarity to see which loves were real and which were chains. Clarity to see that healing does not take everything away, it only removes what was killing you. Vision emerges. Vision of the life you are building in this silence. Vision of a self unafraid of solitude. Vision of connections built not on wounds but on truth. Vision of love that does not demand your betrayal, but celebrates your wholeness. Purpose ignites. Because once you realize you do not need the crowd, you are free to walk your own path, to build your own kingdom, to carve your own destiny. Purpose is born in the loneliness of healing, because only there are you stripped of all false obligations. Discipline carries you, because the temptation to go back will be strong. The texts will come, the guilt will rise, the hunger for company will scream, and discipline means you hold the line. Discipline means you remember better to be lonely in truth than surrounded in lies. Action makes it real. Action is walking away. Action is staying away. Action is sitting in silence until the silence becomes a friend. Action is building in solitude what you could never build in distraction. Gratitude transforms it. Gratitude that the loneliness stripped away what was false. Gratitude that the silence gave you yourself. Gratitude that the exile was the initiation into your own kingdom. Adaptability sharpens it, because loneliness will not always feel the same. Some days it will crush you, some days it will free you. Adaptability means you shift with it, move with it, let it teach you instead of destroy you. Resilience anchors it, because the path is long, the silence is heavy, the exile is real. But resilience means you keep walking no matter how empty the road feels, because you know the road is leading somewhere the crowd will never reach. And learning completes it. Learning that peace is not the first gift of healing. Loneliness is. But loneliness is not the end. Loneliness is the threshold. Loneliness is the furnace. Loneliness is the passage you must walk through to reach true peace. So yes, healing brings loneliness first. But if you endure it, if you walk through it, if you do not run back to the noise, you will find something greater than peace. You will find yourself, and when you find yourself, you will never be lonely again. Because the soul, once whole, is never alone. Healing is exile. You are cast out of the land you once belonged to, not by others, but by yourself. Because once your eyes open, you cannot unsee. Once your ears hear, you cannot unhear. Once you touch the truth, the illusions shatter, and the world you once called home becomes uninhabitable. The old conversations bore you. The old habits repulse you. The old patterns suffocate you. You no longer laugh at the same shallow jokes, no longer swallow the same lies, no longer worship the same false gods. And those around you notice. They say you've changed, and you have. They say you've grown distant, and you have. They say you are no longer the same, and they are right. The road of healing is not the road of the crowd. It is the road of the outcast, the wanderer, the prophet, the exile. Think of Moses, 40 years in the desert. Think of Buddha, leaving his palace to sit alone under the Bodhi tree. Think of Christ, vanishing into the wilderness to fast and wrestle with the adversary. Think of Jung himself, isolating from the academic world, diving into his own visions, descending into the Red Book while his colleagues mocked and abandoned him. Exile is not punishment. Exile is initiation. But initiation is never pleasant. It strips you of every comfort, every crutch, every false belonging. You sit in silence, and at first you feel abandoned, but slowly you realize you are not abandoned. You are being emptied, emptied of noise, emptied of masks, emptied of illusions. And only when you are emptied can you be filled again. Loneliness is that emptying. It is the soul's fasting. It is the hunger that teaches you what you were feeding on before was poison. Do you know why it hurts so much? Because the ego dies slowly. The ego was built on belonging, on being liked, on being approved of, on being part of the crowd. And when you walk away, the ego screams. It panics. It tells you that without them, you are nothing. It confuses exile with death. And so the loneliness feels lethal. But it is not death. It is birth. The chrysalis is tight, dark, suffocating. The caterpillar does not know it is becoming a butterfly. It only feels that everything it was is dissolving. That is healing. Dissolution before transformation. Loneliness before peace. Death before rebirth. And most will never endure it. They will rip the chrysalis open too soon, crawl back half-formed, beg for the old life and call it healing. They will wear the mask of growth while still chained to their wounds. But you, if you endure, you will emerge with wings. Nietzsche spoke of eternal recurrence. The idea that life repeats endlessly, that every choice is made again and again. And he asked, would you live your life differently if you knew you had to live it for eternity? Most people repeat because they never break. They circle the same wounds, the same patterns, the same betrayals. Healing is the refusal to repeat, and that refusal isolates you, because most would rather repeat than transform. That is why healing is lonely, because you refuse to play the same games and suddenly you have no opponents left. You refuse to speak the same lies, and suddenly you have no conversations left. You refuse to betray yourself, and suddenly you have no company left. But do not confuse absence with loss. The silence is not empty, it is pure. The loneliness is not punishment, it is clarity. The exile is not banishment, it is purification. And slowly, as you endure, something shifts. You begin to feel the loneliness differently. It is no longer a wound, it is a womb. It is no longer exile, it is sanctuary. It is no longer death, it is gestation. The loneliness becomes holy. It teaches you that you were never truly alone. You only thought you were, because you mistook the noise of others for connection. But in the silence, you find a deeper connection to yourself, to the unconscious, to the archetypal forces that move through every human life. You begin to feel the myth you are living. You see yourself in Odysseus, wandering, in Prometheus, chained for bringing fire, in every prophet, every exile, every visionary who walked alone before they were understood. This is syphoria, the ecstasy born of psychological death and rebirth, the intoxication of realizing that loneliness is not the end, but the threshold of awakening. Mindset must shift here. You must no longer fear loneliness, but embrace it as proof that you are healing. You must no longer see exile as loss, but as initiation. You must no longer crave the crowd, but crave the silence. Belief anchors it. Belief that the loneliness is temporary. Belief that this silence is not void, but soil. Belief that in this exile, something is being born. Clarity pierces. You see how much of your old life was built on noise. You see how much of your old self was built on lies. You see how many of your old relationships were built on wounds. And once you see, you cannot go back. Vision unfolds. Vision of who you are becoming. Vision of the wings you will grow. Vision of the peace that waits beyond the fire. Purpose burns, because loneliness forces you inward. And in that inwardness, you discover why you are here, not to be consumed by others, not to play the role they gave you, not to live a half-life of masks, but to embody the self fully, to become whole, to burn as only you can burn. Discipline sustains, because some days the loneliness will tempt you back. Some nights the silence will feel unbearable. Discipline is what keeps you seated in the fire until it transforms you. Action makes it alive. Action is choosing solitude when company would kill you. Action is saying no to the old life again and again, even when it would be easier to go back. Action is building in silence instead of fleeing it. Gratitude transforms the pain into power. Gratitude for the people who left because they freed you. Gratitude for the silence because it taught you to listen. Gratitude for the loneliness because it gave you yourself. Adaptability makes you fluid. You learn to flow with the loneliness, to let it teach you instead of break you, to see it not as an enemy but as a guide. Resilience makes you unshakable, because loneliness will test you. It will whisper that you are forgotten. It will whisper that you are lost. But resilience means you rise anyway, again and again, until the whispers die. And learning completes it. You learn that healing does not begin with peace. It begins with loneliness. But that loneliness is not the end. It is the path, the bridge, the crucifixion before resurrection. Yes, healing is lonely. But it is the loneliness of the seed in the soil, of the chrysalis in the dark, of the prophet in the wilderness. And just like them, you will emerge. Not the same, not broken, not abandoned, but reborn. And when you rise, you will know the loneliness was never punishment. It was protection. It was purification. It was preparation. Peace is coming. But first, you must walk alone. Loneliness is not an accident of healing. It is the design. It is the furnace that melts away the false metals you have carried all your life. The masks, the personas, the performances. When the melting is done, only the pure element remains. But most cannot endure the heat. They cry out for escape. They run back to the familiar, even when the familiar was killing them. They would rather live in cages padded with company than walk free through the desert of solitude. That is why few truly heal. That is why so few ever transform. The desert has always been the place of transformation. Moses wandered for 40 years until his people were ready to enter the promised land. Christ faced temptation in the wilderness before returning in power. The desert is the archetype of healing, empty, harsh, unforgiving, but necessary, because it strips away what is unnecessary. And healing is the same. Loneliness is your desert. The people who once distracted you are gone. The patterns that once numbed you are gone. The illusions that once comforted you are gone. And you feel naked in the silence, vulnerable and small. But that is the only way the soul can be reborn. Jung said, the meeting with oneself is, at first, the meeting with one's own shadow. That is why loneliness comes first. In solitude, you meet the parts of yourself you avoided by staying busy, by staying available, by drowning in noise. In solitude, your shadow rises, the grief you buried, the rage you suppressed, the fear you silenced. All of it emerges, demanding to be seen. And this is why healing feels worse before it feels better, because the shadow must rise before it can be integrated. And in that rising, you feel lonelier than ever, because no one else can walk that confrontation for you. No one else can carry that weight. It is only you, face to face with yourself. But here is the secret. Loneliness is not empty. It is full. Full of the very truths you avoided, full of the soul you abandoned, full of the power you denied. Loneliness is not absence, it is presence, raw and unfiltered. It feels unbearable because you are finally present with yourself. Think of Nietzsche, collapsing into madness after years of solitude. yet leaving behind words that would reshape the modern world. Think of Dostoevsky, imprisoned, exiled to Siberia, staring into death, and from that solitude birthing novels that carved into the human soul with surgical precision. They were alone, but their loneliness was fertile. It became the womb of creation. You are not different. Your loneliness is also fertile. It is also womb, but you must endure it long enough for the seeds to sprout. If you run back too soon, you will trample the soil before anything grows. And what grows in loneliness is resilience. Because when you learn to sit with silence, nothing can break you. When you learn to live without distraction, no manipulation can enslave you. When you learn to enjoy your own company, no abandonment can terrify you. Loneliness teaches you the one lesson that makes you untouchable. You are enough. This is why healing is not about gaining people, it is about losing them. Not about becoming more acceptable, but about becoming more authentic. Not about finding peace immediately, but about finding truth first. And truth is always lonely before it is freeing. You will notice this. When you begin to heal, your circle shrinks. The loudest ones disappear. The ones who fed on your wounds fade away. The ones who thrived on your denial resent you. You begin to walk lighter, but also lonelier. And you may wonder if something is wrong. But nothing is wrong. It is proof you are rising. Because the path of individuation is narrow, few can walk it with you. Most will choose the comfort of the herd. Most will choose denial over confrontation. Most will call your solitude arrogance, your boundaries cruelty, your truth selfishness. But let them speak. They are only revealing what they fear, the loneliness they cannot face. And here, mindset must shift again. You must stop seeing loneliness as a problem and start seeing it as a stage. You must stop craving to fill the silence and start listening to it. You must stop mourning the people who left and start celebrating the clarity their absence gave you. Belief becomes your anchor. Belief that this wilderness is temporary. Belief that exile is not forever. Belief that peace is coming, but only if you endure the loneliness long enough to be transformed by it. Clarity grows sharper. You begin to see how false your old life was. You see the dynamics you tolerated. You see the lies you told yourself. You see how much of your connection was actually avoidance. And you realize the loneliness was always there, you just buried it under noise. Vision rises. Vision of the self you are becoming. Vision of the life that will emerge once you are whole. Vision of relationships that will be built on truth instead of wounds. Purpose ignites, because once you are stripped bare, once the old life is gone, you are free to ask, what was I truly meant to do? What am I here for? What is the fire that belongs to me, and me alone? That purpose does not come from the crowd. It comes from the silence of loneliness. Discipline is your weapon, because the temptation to numb yourself will come, to scroll, to drink, to cling to anyone, even if they break you. Discipline means you sit with the emptiness instead of fleeing it. You let it cut you until it cleanses you. Action follows. Action is the courage to keep walking the solitary road. Action is the choice to keep building even when no one sees. Action is the daily practice of choosing truth over comfort. Gratitude transforms. Gratitude that the silence revealed your soul. Gratitude that the loneliness purified your life. Gratitude that exile gave you freedom. Adaptability keeps you fluid, because loneliness shifts. Some days it feels heavy. Some days it feels light. Adaptability means you ride its waves instead of resisting them. Resilience hardens you, because the loneliness will not leave quickly, it will linger. But resilience means you stop waiting for it to leave. You learn to live with it, and in doing so, you rob it of its power, and learning completes it. You learn that peace is not found by avoiding loneliness, but by walking through it. You learn that healing does not remove the loneliness, but transforms it. You learn that the soul is never truly at peace until it can walk alone. So yes, healing brings loneliness first, but that loneliness is the desert before the promised land, the chrysalis before the wings, the silence before the song. It is not the end, it is the beginning. And when you endure it, you emerge with a peace so unshakable, so untouchable, that no noise can take it away. The loneliness is your crucifixion. The peace is your resurrection, and both are necessary. There will come a moment when the silence no longer feels like exile, but like home, when the loneliness no longer feels like punishment, but like freedom, when you realize you are no longer waiting for anyone to arrive, because you have already arrived within yourself. This is the secret no one tells you. Peace does not come from avoiding loneliness, but from walking through it until it transforms. Peace is not given, it is earned in the wilderness of the soul, when you learn to sit with the void and discover that the void was never empty. It was always you, waiting. Carl Jung wrote, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you." And healing forces you to face this. At first, you ache because no one seems to understand. At first, you suffer because the world feels too shallow for the depth you found. But in time, you learn that you do not need everyone to understand. You only need yourself. And once you understand yourself, once you embrace the darkness you ran from, once you integrate the shadow you denied, once you reclaim the soul you abandoned, you are never truly lonely again, because wholeness is its own company. This is the paradox of healing. You think it will bring peace first, but it brings loneliness. Yet if you endure that loneliness, if you sit in it without running back, it will carve you into someone who no longer fears solitude. And when you no longer fear solitude, you are free. Free from manipulation, free from false belonging, free from the hunger for approval, free from the endless scattering of yourself into the hands of others. You stand whole, sovereign, untouchable. And when you stand whole, peace arrives. Not the fragile peace of distraction, not the shallow peace of belonging, not the conditional peace of approval, but the deep peace that comes from knowing you are enough. You have always been enough, and you will always be enough. That peace is eternal. It does not depend on who stays or who leaves. It does not depend on noise or silence. It does not depend on belonging or exile. It is born from the soul that walked through loneliness and emerged unbroken. So remember, healing will not give you peace first. It will give you loneliness. It will strip you, burn you, empty you. But if you endure it, if you walk through it, if you refuse to run back to the comfort of chains, the loneliness will transform. And when it does, peace will come. Not as a gift, but as the consequence of your courage. Peace is not found by avoiding the desert. Peace is found by walking it. Peace is not found by denying the silence. Peace is found by listening to it. Peace is not found by clinging to others. Peace is found by belonging to yourself. So do not fear the loneliness. Embrace it. Walk through it. Let it break you, let it strip you, let it cleanse you. Because beyond it waits the one thing the world cannot give and cannot take away the peace of a soul that is whole. And once you find that, you will never be lonely again.